Hi everybody, I'm Brad Treat. Today what I want to talk to you about is how to win a business pitch competition. They used to be called business plan competitions, but they're really less about the plan and more about the pitch. So our agenda for today, talking about why these things even exist and how to start prepping for them, how to prep for the questions, and then how to really bring the energy. So a little about myself. I've been a participant, I've been a winner, I've been somebody who didn't win, been an organizer, and been a coach for multiple business pitch competitions. This particular photo was actually featured when my company won $100,000 in a business pitch competition in New York State. Seated directly to my left was the then governor. And in front of us was about 2,500 people. So I've been there on the stage and I've also coached at this particular event. They ran for about 6 years, and for about 6 years running, every single one of the winners had practiced and presented in my living room in the week leading up to the finals. So we got to be pretty good at this stuff. So why do these business plan competitions even exist? A brief history, there's really two ways that they come into being. One is they're a nice promotion for entrepreneurship programs. One of the schools that first kicked this off was MIT. MIT really shook the world when they said, hey, we're going to give $50,000 to students for their business pitch. And so these numbers have blown up from here. There's even student business pitches that are now $1 million. But at the time when MIT did this, people were like, oh my gosh, what are you guys doing? And they've really been setting the trends for entrepreneurial education since then. The other way these business pitches exist is economic development. It's an opportunity for politicians to say, hey, we're creating jobs. We're going to find these great new companies, and we're going to give them a kickstart. We're going to give them some attention. But also, they're an opportunity for a spotlight. In the picture here, I'm showing current Governor Kathy Hochul. Kathy Hochul, when she was lieutenant governor, was very active in a number of the business pitch competitions that happened here in New York State, where the grand prize was $1 million, and the entire prize money was over $3 million. And it's an opportunity for them to say, hey, we're doing things to create the new jobs, for the new industries, the new companies, because the net new job growth comes from the new business, and that's more effective and efficient of supporting the new companies than backstopping the faltering ones. So this is why they do this. So let me talk to you a bit about why I like these competitions. One of the things is it can really help focus a team. It encourages you to have a really tight presentation. Unlike an investor presentation when you're in a conference room, you're on a clock, and that encourages you to make your presentation really tight and really crisp. It's also one of the times that you get honest feedback. If you go and talk to investors, sometimes they don't tell you what they really think. But in these investor pitch competitions, you finally get honest feedback. The money's nice, but that should not be the only reason to do it. You also get PR exposure. There may be some other customers in the audience, and regardless of how you finish, depending on what the judges think, there's investors in the audience who may have a different criteria and look at what you're doing. And I've seen all of these as positive outcomes. Now, one of the things I don't like about business plan competitions, they're all about picking winners, which also means they have to pick losers. This is particularly problematic when you're dealing with a student population, because some students may be at different places in their business. You say, well, we're an educational experience, we're not about losers. Also, what I've seen is judges' variability. It can be quite different. One set of judges can look at the same set of businesses and come to a completely different conclusion, and they may be comparing very non-similar business, and even those businesses could be at different life cycles in their company. I'm showing a picture here. I was part of a business pitch competition. I told you I won $100,000 first prize, beat out over 100 other companies. That same company, 3 weeks prior, we had presented at my alma mater, and we came in third to a business that was primarily designed around driving drunk people home on scooters. I was a little bitter, but I understand how these things. So did we get some great experience out of it? Yes. And so there can be a bit of a love and hate. The judges are really looking for the winner. A lot of the focus here is who's number one, because it's about PR, public relations, and all the attention is going to focus on there, which may be different from how venture capital approach things. And so they're going to say, did you guys tell us enough? Have you told a story? Are you somebody who can stand in front of a camera and stand next to a politician and tell a good story? Are you likable? Are coachable? People are going to like you. And is that prize money going to move your business forward? I'll talk more about that in a second, because all the focus is on that winner. Now, the other people you should be focused on are the organizers. The organizers can set you up to lose. They're going to give you very specific instructions on PowerPoint format, which version of PowerPoint, what the ratio of your slides. You've got to follow all these directions. Maybe you need live internet. Don't rely on the internet. Many of these things are held in auditoriums. There may not be even operating internet, so make sure you have there. These deadlines are real. Oftentimes, these are run by government organizations. They don't care that your cat ran over your router and shut it down. Get your slides in on time, because one of the things they're very worried about is anything that looks like favoritism. So treat it that way. And if you show up late, it's like you're not there at all. I've seen it where they have very specific criteria who can be on a team. This is particularly true for student events. If it's a student business, then it should be a student business. If it's a student showing their family's business or a friend's business, it's not really the case. And similarly, it's a PR event, so make sure you look the part. I'm going to talk more about that. And all these things have a timer, both on the presentations and the Q&A, and just rambling on and arguing with the timekeeper, just don't do it. It makes you look bad. So what you can control, you can practice. Practice a lot. Practice with potential mentors. Listen for red flags. I'll talk more about that in a second. And practice the questions, these things you can do. Please, oh please don't lie. I was at a business pitch competition in New York City. This company did an amazing job talking about how they were going to revolutionize trucking with the innovation they had on making trucks more aerodynamic. And it's like, they're going to win this thing. And as it got into the later part of the question, it came out that, well, they hadn't actually done field testing. All they'd done was computer simulations. Now, had they said from the beginning that they were doing computer simulations, they probably would have done very well. But they made us all believe they've been testing on real trucks. And many of us know there's a big difference between computer simulations and real-world testing, and they made us believe that one was the other. When they got caught in that lie, nobody believed everything else they had to say. As a matter of fact, the panel, the judges, and the audience was like, oh, I don't trust these folks. And so you want to be able to tell the truth. If you don't know the answer, don't lie, because once they catch you in one lie, they don't believe anything else you have to say. Anytime you can talk about the customer, I often say, talk about the voice of the customer. A red flag for me is when somebody says, I think, or I believe, or I just know. What's most compelling is to say, when we talk to customers, here's what we learned. If you can show things, mock-ups, those are so important. I had a student of mine, he once won $35,000 in a business pitch competition, as photographed here, with a mock-up that he made out of styrofoam, duct tape, and Krylon. Because people would say, okay, I see what you're working on. And now, last but not least, I'll talk more about the ask in a second, but make sure it's an ask that people can fulfill. So now you got to get going. You're going to go do a business pitch competition. You're probably going to start with something like this. Your latest venture deck, maybe you've got a sales deck, maybe you've got an academic presentation. I've got to turn that into specific for that pitch event. And by the way, each pitch event, maybe you're doing multiple, each one should have its own deck. You want to get these things done sooner than later. Don't wait to the deadline. That's a mistake, because you need to have time to practice. And make sure you have plenty of time doing that, because I find these things get won or lost on practice. Practice questions, set up the practice times, and do not wait till the day before it's due. So let's talk about the ask. So every one of these competitions, you know what the money is there, and they want to make sure that money can move the business forward. I had one of my investors often say to me, they say, Brad, we don't want to fund piers, we want to fund bridges. A pier gets you the middle lake, a bridge gets the other side. The people providing the money for these competitions, they're thinking the same way. Is this money going to make a difference? Tell us how the money's going to make a difference. I was once working with an entrepreneur. They say they needed $100 million. They're competing for $1 million, but they said they needed $100 million. I said to you, so if you go in there and say, I need $100 million and the grand prize is $1 million, they're not going to give it to you, because you're only presenting a solution for 1% of your problem. So know that what you're presenting is something that can make an impact on your business. Where will we get you? How will we make the business less risky? And show that direct impact. Many of these times, they say, here's what we're offering. Specifically talk about how it's going to come with an outcome. All right. These things are won in the questions. So how do you prepare for the questions? Well, first, you're going to work with mentors, and you're going to listen. If you start hearing these questions, that means you should change your slides. Now, don't feel like you need to change your slide on every single time you get a question, but you start seeing some of these over and over, then you got yourself a problem. So those are the ones you need to change your question. When you get into the questions, there's a way to get the question in advance, and that's to do practice. I'm going to talk more about that in a second. Make sure you answer the question. The timing is for the presentation, but there's also timing for the Q&A. If you ramble on in a question, you're not going to get to the rest of the questions. And one of the things that happens is the judges don't get answers to the questions they ask. They always assume the worst. Whatever questions aren't answered, they assume the worst possible outcome. I've seen pitch competitions where the person had 4 minutes, they spent 2 minutes answering each of the questions and no other questions got asked, and it really hurt them. Similarly, when I talk about the crescendo, you want to answer the question and support it. We oftentimes have a tendency to want to do a build-up and then give an answer. Say yes, no, here's the answer, 5, 10, whatever it is, and then provide support, but make sure also it's a short. Give yourself 10, 25 seconds max, and then you're done. One of the things I've seen before also is the judge asked one question and the entrepreneur answered a different one. If you find yourself hearing, hey, I'm hearing the same question again, don't assume they didn't understand. Assume you probably answered the wrong question. So listen for that. I was once working with an entrepreneur who was presenting. We asked him a question, he didn't answer it. We asked it again, and he answered it the same way, louder. And we asked it again, and he just got louder. If you find yourself in that situation, maybe you're not answering the question. Now, when I talk about the traffic cop is where you have a team of people. And so you're going to figure out who's going to answer what kind of questions. And so maybe we'll say, okay, hey, that's a marketing question. We're going to pass it over to Susan. Susan's going to handle marketing. And two things happen there. One, you look organized. And two, it gives Susan one or two heartbeats to think about a good answer. Now, here's another thing I want to mention is when this happens, when you have a team of people answering questions, if you pass that question over to Susan and she answers the question, nobody else can talk. So it's one of the scenarios that I've seen is you've got a team of people up here, and the first person, maybe we said Susan's going to handle marketing questions. Susan answers, and then I answer, and then Bob answers, and Tony answers. Judges don't know who to listen to. So make sure you, even if Susan left that thing out, I got to go. Let it go. Because when you speak up, you're not supporting the other person in your panel, you're actually discrediting them. So I'll tell you a quick story. When I was in engineering school, I had a material science professor, and we're leading up to the final exam. The material science professor walked around and handed out a sheet and said, here's the questions that'll be on the exam. I'm going to change some of the mechanics, but if you can do these 30 questions, you'll do fine on the exam. And I about fell out of my chair. I was like, oh my gosh, this exam is going to take us 18 hours. We only have 3. How are we ever going to finish it? And so he proceeded to say, hey, if you can do these 30 questions, you're going to do great on the exam. I'm only going to give you 5 of these. You just don't know which 5, so prepare for them all. I want you to do a similar thing with presentations. You want to get your presentation deck done early so you can give the presentation to experienced business people and ask them to ask you questions. So when you're doing practice sessions, have experienced business people ask you questions and write them down. Don't feel like you have to answer them. Write them down. It's sort of like my engineering exam where I got all the questions ahead of time and I could practice. And if you're getting obvious questions too much, maybe you change your presentation. But literally, these things are won or lost. I was working with a friend of mine a number of years ago, that same competition I spoke about. During the practice sessions, we had asked him a really tough question. This question, I won't go into the details of what his product did, but if his product malfunctioned, it could kill babies. It's kind of dramatic. And so during the final presentation at this event, he got asked that same question about potentially killing babies. That's pretty heavy. And remember, he was standing behind the lectern, and he kind of smiled and looked to the side, stood next to the lectern and said, let me tell you about this, and nailed that question. And in the Q&A later, when the press was talking to the judges, they actually pointed out his response to that. It's like, we threw every hard question at this entrepreneur, and he nailed every single one of them. The reason he'd done it is in the lead up to preparing for this business pitch competition, he got a bunch of experienced people together. He'd had them ask tough questions. He wrote them all down, and so he was ready when he heard those questions again. Okay. Switching gears here, rubrics. Now, every single one of these business pitch competitions has their own rubric. You should know what the rubric is, and it's also important to know that the rubric that a business pitch competition uses is different than what, say, a venture capitalist or a bank or some other funding source is going to think about. And so review the rubric and make sure you're going to modify your presentation so it fits that rubric. There's lots of rubrics out there, but I'll tell you a quick story. I showed you a picture of myself winning a competition in New York State. A big part of the reason we won was we understood that the rubric cared about job growth and economic impact in New York State. And so we were one of the few competitors that actually talked about that. One of the things that we had learned was by looking at the rubric, it said right there on the rubric, 20% of the judging scoring had to do with the regional impact. So we had other people who were there who had good businesses. I don't want to say they were better businesses, but they were good businesses. But what they had not done is directly addressed regional impact. And we talked about how we would create jobs both with our own company, we'd create jobs with partner companies, we'd impact the region in a positive way. And that was a real difference maker. We often call this our secret weapon. So I've got a couple examples here of some other rubrics from different organizations, New York State, business idea competitions, Chapman University, the Syracuse Business Pitch Competition, organization called 607 Soaring out of Elmira and Corning. 76 West was a clean energy competition, Grow New York. The reason I'm kind of buzzing through these is the point is each one of these rubrics is different and they're very specific to that organization. So know what that rubric is and design your presentation to match it and make sure you answer all the questions and knowing that the judges are told follow this rubric really closely because we want to make sure that we're fair in our judging. Okay, so one of the questions I get a lot also is, Brad, what do I wear to this thing? Well, keep in mind, a lot of times these are funded by government and university officials. And so I don't wear a tie a lot these days, but some of the times I do is when I meet with senior people with government and senior people with organizations. So if you're not sure what to wear, default to good old business formal. Even though it's not that common in entrepreneurship circles, I'm still going to recommend that you go to business formal because this is a PR event. You want to say, how is this person going to look on the evening news? Now that being said, the caveat to that is, if it's not true to your band, don't do it. I work with the Farm Bureau, and they have an ag innovation competition. Putting farmers in suit and tie, and they're going to be talking about the manure processing system, doesn't make sense. So make sure you stay on brand, stay messy with your dress code, but whatever it is, be deliberate about it, and say, how am I going to look in the photograph? How am I going to look when they post this online, when I'm on the evening news, when they do the video blurb? How am I going to be? Okay, if you've done everything right, you've given your presentation a lot of times. So many times you're sick of hearing it. But now you're going to go up onto this stage and you're going to say, I'm so excited about this business. You have to be excited. Now you're giving your presentation for the 50th, 100th time. You don't want to walk up and say, like, hi, I'm Brad. I'm so excited to talk to you about our company. Like, you've got to bring that energy. So you got to say, okay, this is the first time they're going to hear it. And I like to point to Drew Brees. Drew Brees is the Super Bowl winning quarterback for the New Orleans Saints. He recently retired. But one of the things he did before games is he would get his players really amped up. And so they're in a stadium, 100,000 people. They're all cheering. All these guys are multimillionaire NFL football players, and he'd get them really amped up. I'm not going to play the video, but I want you to check it out. And what he'd do is this call and response, and Drew Brees and his crowd look like this. And he'd call out 1, and they'd call out 2, and 3, and 4, and he'd get them excited. I want you to find a way to get the energy pumping. Maybe you got to do some jumping jacks. Don't go drinking a bunch of Red Bull and get all shaky, but you want to bring in the energy. So when you walk on a stage, it's not, hey, I'm so excited about talking about our company. It's like, hey, I'm so excited today to talk about our solution that's going to make a huge difference. Let's go. Bring that energy because that energy is infectious. And if you start out your presentation with that energy, if you walk onto that stage and you've got the energy of the New Orleans Saints about to win the Super Bowl, then you're going to win your business pitch competition. All right, thank you for your time. Here's my contact information. I look forward to hearing from you.